My thanks to Martine and to Barrick, and I apologize in advance for my voice. It's a little more fragile than I would like it to be. And it's certainly a privilege to be designated as the lawyer to come address a group of scientists such as yourself. I dare say that I enjoy attending your conferences more than you would enjoy attending one of mine. They're very different cultures that don't always easily mix. At my conferences, I hear a lot about risk, and there's almost a palpable element of fear and anxiety, and then I come to your conferences, and what I hear is hope and possibility. So I, like I said, I'm very happy to be here. Here we go. Well, actually, before we get started, I think by way of background, when I was a graduate student in biology at University of Michigan, I helped teach a course called The Science and Politics of Frankenfoods. And for those of you who haven't heard the term before, Frankenfoods is sort of the vernacular term for genetically modified foods. And it was the term that was generated in part by consumer activists, but then picked up as by the media, and sort of became a shorthand for all the risks that could be associated with the new technology. And that was kind of my introduction to all the factors that go beyond science and can sometimes have effects that are somewhat unpredictable on the development of a new technology. Then when I went to FDA and had an opportunity to work on some of those same issues, again from the food perspective, and then nano came along, and looking at those things, it was really a lucky break for me. So what I hope to do today is bring sort of that perspective to bear, the internal FDA perspective, and couple that with the things that I've been observing now as a participant on the outside, pull all that together and open just a little window into the anxiety of the realm that I typically deal with. I don't want to be Dr. Killjoy, so it's not going to be a big window. It's just going to be a little window. I like to start with the big picture. Here we see international government investment in nanotechnology, so this doesn't even factor in private sector investment. But you can see a pretty dramatic increase over the course of the past decade, and this chart really leaves off in 2004. The trend lines all keep going upward. The yellow line is U.S. investment, U.S. government investment. The green line is the Japanese government investment. Blue line is Western Europe, and red line is others. I think if we could break out others and pull out China, I think that we would see some pretty interesting figures there as well, because China has a lot of money to spend, and nanotechnology is one of the places that they're choosing to spend it. So this is the current generation's version of the Apollo project, making a huge public investment in the development of this technology, and that's a lot of what's propelling this into the marketplace. Domestically, we have the National Nanotechnology, which is our government program, started in 2001 to coordinate federal nanotech research, R&D research. And we have 25 participating agencies, including FDA. Over $1.5 billion has been allocated under the NNI, and it has been split out among 13 agencies. So as you can see with the numbers, if 25 agencies participate and only 13 are getting funding, that means that 8 are not. And until very recently, FDA was one of those 8. These numbers are impossibly small, and I don't really expect you to read them, but I think the pattern is pretty discernible. You have NNI funding from 2001 to 2010, and you can see that it's really just a handful of agencies. Not surprisingly, starting with the Department of Defense as being the major recipient of NNI funding, progressing up through 2010, and you can see more agencies being added into the funding mix, and the amount of funding jumping up to on the order of 1.7, 1.8 billion. But two things are notable about this, and two things that have raised alarm among outside observers. One is FDA funding. FDA, until very recently, didn't get any funding whatsoever under the NNI. That means that whatever money FDA spent on getting ready for what is expected to be the coming wave of technology, it was cannibalizing from other programs. And if you read the newspaper ever, you see FDA routinely on the front page of the newspaper because of some issue with drugs or an issue with a device, or lately a lot of issues with foods. And so FDA has a lot of very pressing public health priorities, and it has until now had to weigh very carefully which of those things to pull money from to try to address what are clearly some issues that nanotechnology presents. The second thing is this EHS funding, environmental health and safety research funding, again, until very recently added up to less than 1% of the total expenditure on research. Now, percentages don't mean everything. A very small percent of a very large amount can still be a lot of money. But I think for a lot of folks, the fact that the kind of research that just looks to see what potential risks might be presented by these products was being limited to 1% of total funding struck a lot of folks as grossly inadequate. And there have been a lot of calls over the past few years to boost that significantly. Now, in terms of what FDA has done about nanotechnology, again, with the money that it's cannibalized from other programs, they formed a nanotechnology task force in 2006. They had a public meeting and requested comment also that same year. And then in what I would consider to be light speed for a government agency approach to anything, particularly something as complicated as this, a year later, they had pulled together this report and had issued it. Things move very quickly in nanotechnology. You say 2007 to 2010, this report's 3 years old. FDA still considers it to be current. So if you wanted to pick it up and read it tomorrow, I don't think that you would find that there have been any significant changes in the intervening time. And I'll take a few minutes to review some of the highlights of that report. One of the things that it addressed was the need for FDA to bulk up on its scientific capacity. So they recognized that their scientific capacity had to be improved, that there were some serious questions about the adequacy of the tools that they would need to describe and evaluate nanomaterials. That lack of data on nanomaterial safety is a problem, and FDA's access to information has been a continuing issue as it tries to get a handle on this technology, because FDA has really very limited ways of trying to secure data from industry outside of the product approval process. And so in light of all this, FDA said, we're still feeling our way through this, therefore early consultation is highly recommended, especially for combination products. And I'll talk a little bit more about combination products in a few minutes. A second thing that the report addressed was the adequacy of FDA's authority, and that's the piece that I had a small part in. For those of you not familiar with the U.S. legal system, FDA derives its authority from the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. That's the law that Congress passed. And then FDA has to implement that law, and so then it issues its regulations. So in the U.S., we talk about statutes, and those are the laws passed by Congress, and then regulations, which are the authorized agency's implementation of those laws. And what FDA concluded after a fairly comprehensive internal review looking at its authority over all of the different product categories was that they didn't really need any more statutory authority. They didn't need Congress to pass more laws for them. And they also concluded that at least as of 2007, for FDA to issue nanotechnology-specific regulations wasn't warranted, and I'll talk a little bit more about the thinking behind that in a few minutes. But they did concede that their authority was, in quotes, more comprehensive for products subject to pre-market authorization, which are all the products that we've been hearing about here today, the drugs, the devices, the biologics, and the combination products. The products subject to post-market authorization, as a general matter, foods, dietary supplements, a subcategory called medical foods that you may have heard of, cosmetics. Those are areas where, the flip side would be that FDA's authority is somewhat less comprehensive, and I'll get into a little more detail on that.